Hello and welcome to KidsAbility's presentation on sensory processing and understanding the sensory world around you. Here is an overview of the presentation and what we will be discussing today. What is sensory processing? The 8 senses, how we react to sensory experiences, and for each of these senses, how do they affect us and what can we do to enhance our experiences and overall well-being? Towards the end, we will put it all together as we go through a few real-life scenarios to better understand how sensory processing influences our daily lives and the strategies we can implement to navigate various situations more effectively. Finally, if you have any questions along the way, please write them down and ask your OT. Just a quick note, this workshop will cover information for clients, parents, and caregivers. This information is for educational purposes. For specific strategies, equipment recommendations, and assistance with your teen's specific goals, please speak to an occupational therapist. What is sensory processing? Sensory processing is when our bodies and the environment send our brains information through our senses. This information is processed and organized so that we feel comfortable, secure, and respond appropriately to particular situations and environmental demands. For example, if you were to walk into your house at the end of a workday, you might smell dinner cooking, hear the dog barking to go outside, and then notice that your shoes are feeling tight on your feet. Your senses take in all the information, and your brain receives this input. You select which sensory input you need to pay attention to what is the most important stimulus. You might choose to respond first to the dog who needs to go outside, or perhaps your shoes are becoming intolerable. Why did you not notice that your feet hurt on the drive home? Your brain was able to notice the sensory information from your feet and hold off on bringing it to your attention until an appropriate time. This is an example of good sensory processing. The 8 senses. Our OTs know and talk about 8 senses, not just your traditional touch, vision, hearing, smell, and taste. We have 3 more senses that you may not have learned about before. The first is the tactile system. That's our sense of touch. The second is our visual system. That's our sense of sight. The third is our auditory sense. This is our sense of hearing. The fourth is the olfactory sense. This is our sense of smell. The fifth is your gustatory sense, or your sense of taste. The sixth sense is our vestibular system, better known as your sense of movement and balance. The seventh is the proprioception system, which is our sense of body awareness and position. And finally, the 8th sense is interoception, and this is our sense of internal body sensations. This visual on the slide is to help illustrate the importance of our senses and our ability to process sensory information correctly to develop other skills. Our senses and sensory processing provide the foundation for higher level skills. Feel free to take a minute to pause this presentation and look at which senses and skills need to be developed at the bottom of the pyramid for higher level skills to flourish and thrive. This is why sensory processing matters, the way we react. The way we react to sensory input happens on a continuum. If you look to the left of this slide, you'll see examples of what we call a low threshold for sensory input. These youth are what we sometimes call avoiders. They may avoid certain sensory events, for example, loud noises by covering their ears, or they may avoid intense movement activities like jumping or being upside down. For example, they may be more sensitive to the sensation of their clothing, sensitive to light touch, or getting their hands messy. When you see the words over-responsive or oversensitive, we're referring to the teen who overreacts to stimulation. Another way to think of this is that they have a tiny cup and only a little bit of sensation overflows that cup. They only need a little bit of sensation to generate a response. This can look in 2 different ways, fear or anger. Signs of over-responding, being sensitive, or avoiding sensory input can look like covering ears, avoiding certain textures, not liking to get messy, poor tolerance with haircuts or hair brushing, and picky eaters. Hermione Granger exemplifies traits of a low threshold individual. She is highly sensitive to sensory experiences and often reacts strongly to high-pressure situations, such as intense academic demands or conflict with others. Her reactivity is evident in chaotic environments where she may become frustrated or anxious, highlighting her sensitivity. While she does not shy away from challenges, she seeks control and stability, preferring well-structured environments over chaotic ones. Overall, Hermione embodies the characteristics of a low-threshold individual as she is aware of and responsive to her surroundings. Moving away from our low-threshold teens over to the right side of the continuum and the right side of the slide, we have the high threshold. These are youth we sometimes call seekers. They may seek out more movement or more touch than other teens. They may also have difficulty registering sensory information, meaning that they may miss pertinent information or need a more stimulating environment in order to attend and participate. When you see the words under-responsive or seeking, we're referring to the teen who needs more stimulation in their daily routine. A teen at this end of the continuum can present in two main different ways. On this slide, we see Peter Parker as a prime example of a seeker. Individuals like Peter exhibit a heightened activity level and a curiosity about their environment. They actively seek out sensory experiences, whether through touching objects or exploring their surroundings in various ways. In terms of our cup analogy, seekers possess a large cup that they strive to fill with a rich variety of sensory input, constantly seeking new challenges and stimuli. Meanwhile, we have Bella Swan, who exemplifies an under-responsive individual. Bella often appears disengaged, seemingly tuning out from the intensity of her surroundings. She may demonstrate a high tolerance for discomfort, often failing to notice when she is messy or experiencing varying temperatures. This under-responsiveness can lead to her unintentionally intrude on others' personal space. Using our cup analogy, while Bella has a large cup, it frequently feels empty because she tends to withdraw from sensory experiences, requiring support to engage more fully. When reflecting on how we react to sensory events, it's important to remember that every nervous system is unique. For instance, Simone Biles, the renowned Olympic gymnast, thrives in environments filled with music and movement, seeking out the tactile sensations of gymnastics and the visual stimulation of performance. However, she has also experienced challenges, such as the pressures of competition and the intense atmosphere of a packed gymnasium, which can make her sensitive to overwhelming stimuli, like loud music and the chaos of performance settings. As we delve into each of the 8 senses and how we typically react to these sensations, remember that everyone's nervous system is distinct. While we discuss typical responses, not everyone will feel or react the same way, and there's no right or wrong way to respond to sensory input. However, if sensory processing impacts daily routines, activities, or learning, there are ways we can support individuals with these differences. So let's get started. We all do things throughout our day to alter our environment or to provide our bodies with sensations or input to help regulate our attention, behavior, and arousal level. Often we may not know what we're doing or that we're doing these things at all, or are able to acknowledge how it is impacting our behavior or our ability to make sense of the world around us. So let's take a minute to consider the following and what your sensory preferences are by looking at the Sensory Tools survey on the next slide. As we dive into our sensory systems, we will start with touch. We receive touch information from the receptors in our skin and our mouth. Touch receptors help us identify light touch, deep pressure, vibration, temperature, and pain. The tactile system helps us understand where our body is in space or body awareness, and helps us create a plan and carry out that plan to do things, or what we call motor planning. Now let's discuss how touch affects us in general. Our responses to sensory input in the environment are largely dependent on evolutionary and biological responses that are beneath our awareness. For example, on this slide, you can see that we say light touch generally creates a fight or flight reaction in our brain. This is programmed in because if you think back in the day when cavemen were around and they needed to be on high alert for predators, bugs, and attuned to small changes in their environment and around their bodies. That's why when you feel something crawling up your back, your reaction is likely to be intense. As for deep touch tends to be calming for our nervous system and tends to release feel-good chemicals in our bodies. And our brain thinks of a nice deep massage and how great you feel after. Now let's revisit the continuum we discussed earlier: oversensitive, just right, and undersensitive, especially in relation to how touch affects us. For some individuals, sensitivity to touch can lead to challenges, like discomfort during haircuts, anxiety around nail trimming, difficulty with bathing and self-care, aversion to messy hands or wet clothing, and preferences for certain food textures. It is important to recognize that this sensitivity can trigger fear or anger responses. For those who are over-responsive, some effective strategies include establishing coping mechanisms and calming techniques beforehand. Gradual exposure to uncomfortable situations can also be beneficial, allowing them to adjust at their own pace. Using deep pressure touch instead of light touch can help. For example, a firm hug may provide comfort. Offering a towel or napkin for cleaning hands when feeling overwhelmed can also ease distress. Additionally, utilizing a mirror can create predictability during tasks, like haircutting, helping to reduce anxiety around touch. Always ensure we are approaching individuals from the front to prevent surprises, as anticipating unpleasant sensations can significantly increase one's ability to tolerate those experiences. Now let's explore the other side of the continuum, those who are undersensitive to touch. These individuals might constantly seek out tactile experiences, often touching people and objects around them. They may be less aware of their surroundings, leading to messy eating habits or chewing on inedible objects. Additionally, they may have difficulty recognizing personal space boundaries as they're often in search of more sensory input to fill their needs. Next up is vision, and we receive visual information with our eyes. Youth learn to coordinate their eyes with their hands, feet, and body movements. Vision works with the other sensory systems, like the senses of movement, body position, and how this provides more information. For example, how far something is away, how big of a step we need to take to clear that gap, or how hard we need to throw something based on how far our eyes tell us it is. Moving on to how visual input impacts our behavior and arousal. In general, bright and fast-moving things tend to wake us up and alert most people. So do highly contrasting colors, while on the other hand, neutral or cool colors and slow-moving visual input tends to be relaxing and calming. For a more specific example of bright and fast-moving, if we come back to that evolutionary and biological response, if you see a big strobe light or a siren on a vehicle, you know that visual input is telling you to be on high alert. Whereas if you looked at something like a slow lava lamp, you can think about how relaxing and calming that might be. When considering how vision affects teens who are sensitive to or actively avoiding visual input, it's important to recognize that they may experience heightened fear or anger responses in overstimulating environments. For example, they might feel easily overwhelmed in crowded spaces, bothered by harsh lighting, or find themselves more comfortable in dimly lit areas. Additionally, they may become distracted by movement and activity around them. To support these individuals, several strategies can be implemented. Minimizing visual distractions in their environment is essential, which can include adjusting lighting to make their preferences, such as using softer dimmed lights. Creating a designated quiet space like a small tent or a nook in a busy classroom can provide a haven for those moments when they feel overwhelmed, allowing them to limit visual input and regain their composure. By implementing these strategies, we can help them navigate their environments more comfortably and effectively. Some helpful strategies for supporting these teens include implementing color coding to enhance organization and clarity, creating minimalist environments to reduce distractions and help them focus better, visual timers to provide clear indications of time remaining for tasks, which aids in managing anxiety, utilizing high contrast visuals to enhance visibility and comprehension, while regular movement breaks allow them to reset and refocus. Interactive learning tools engage their attention and make learning more dynamic. Additionally, visual schedules offer a clear roadmap of daily activities, helping them navigate their routines with greater ease. Together, these strategies create a more accommodating environment that promotes comfort and effectiveness in our interactions. Next up is hearing. We receive auditory information in the ears. Tuning in and tuning of certain sounds is essential to the development of communication and listening. When we talk about communication, we are referring to both verbal and nonverbal communication, including gestures, eye contact, and body language. Infants need to be able to tune into the voices and actions of adults around them to begin developing communication skills like eye contact and imitation. How does hearing affect us? In general, loud, high, unexpected sounds tend to wake us up or alert us. Coming back to that evolutionary perspective and our brain functions, loud can mean danger. It means that it needs your attention right now. While on the other hand, soft sounds with gentle rhythm, low tones, and simple melodies tend to be relaxing and calming. Some people will have preferences of intermittent noise, where noise starts and stops at irregular intervals versus consistent noise like white noise. Lots of babies enjoy that white noise for sleep as well. Now thinking about how hearing affects our behavior and arousal for those teens who are sensitive on that left side of the continuum with their tiny cup. Some youth are sensitive to or actively avoid auditory input, which can manifest in behaviors such as covering their ears or becoming upset in loud environments. They may react strongly to unexpected noises and often find themselves distracted by background noise or overall commotion. To support these individuals, several helpful strategies can be employed. Creating a hideout for overwhelming situations offers a safe space where they can retreat when needed. Providing noise-canceling headphones can also help them manage their auditory environment more effectively. It's important to be mindful of the volume of one's voice and to prepare them for any loud noises they might encounter. Additionally, reducing background noise wherever possible can create a more comfortable atmosphere, allowing these youth to engage more fully without the stress of overwhelming sounds. For youth on the other side of that continuum, the Peter Parker and Bella Swans who are under-responsive to auditory input may not seem bothered by auditory input or they're missing important auditory information in their environment. They might like the sound of music and background noise. They may make noise constantly, or they might tune you out when you call their name or not be able to hear their name above the busy drone of a classroom. Some strategies for them would be use musical toys or toys with sound, use changes in volume of your voice to increase their attention to see if they notice the difference between whispering and talking louder, to use songs when possible, for example, different songs that mean different things to let them know what the transition is going to be, and then you may need to get down on their level, make eye contact, and touch their arm to get their attention. In general, if they are under-responsive in this sense, we might engage their other senses to get their attention before giving them a verbal message they need to listen to. Overall, ensure that you are supporting their understanding with verbal visuals, pictures, or gestures. Next is smell and taste. We receive taste and smell information with receptors in our mouth and nose. Some quick facts about these senses is that oral motor activities, for example chewing gum or sucking on candy, can help regulate our bodies, and smells can bring us back to a very specific time, which may be harmful for some, as it is highly linked to memory. In general, how do taste and smell affect our behavior and arousal? In general, sour, cold, spicy, bitter, hot, and bad smells wake us up and increase our arousal. If we go back again to our evolutionary kind of perspective, you want to make sure that you are smelling and tasting things that might have gone bad, or are not safe for you to eat. And then on the other hand, sweet, bland, savory, warm, room temperature tend to have less of an effect, similar to soft, sweet smells. They call them comfort foods for a reason. And when we think about how some teens who are oversensitive to this type of input might behave or react, we might notice that they notice all odors or tastes that others do not. They notice small changes in taste, and these might be our picky eaters. So some strategies to consider might be removing scented soap, lotion, and detergents, consider mildly flavored foods, and consider the temperature of the food, warm but not hot. And then how do taste and smell affect those teens who are undersensitive? They might be unaware of pleasant odors, they might lick or taste inedible objects, they might prefer spicy or hot foods, and smell everything in their environment. They might be seeking out these tastes and smells or not noticing taste or smells that most people do. Some strategies and activities for them to meet the needs of their big cup might be to use scented markers or scented Play-Doh or a variety of flavors and spices in foods. The vestibular system is an extremely important system. It is the strongest input we can give the brain with long-lasting effects. This system is linked to several of our other sensory systems and works together with them to help us make sense of our environment. For example, think about how you might feel if you were to stand up and spin around right now. How long would it take you for you to feel better again? We receive information about gravity and movement in the receptors in our inner ear. If you have ever had an ear infection or an inner ear issue, then you know how greatly your balance was affected and probably are intimately aware of how this system helps you with that. The vestibular system tells us if we are moving, what direction we're moving in, what speed we're going, what our head position is in, and if objects are moving around us. It allows us to accurately use our vision to prepare our posture, maintain our balance, plan our actions, move, calm ourselves, and regulate our behaviors. And all of these things are just with one sensory system. Mind-blowing, right? Now do you see why it is so important? Vestibular input to the brain is often referred to as turning the lights on in the brain. Because of the connections between vestibular system and our auditory system. It also plays an integral role in language processing and production. So how does vestibular input impact our behavior and arousal? People's reactions to vestibular input vary, but typically symmetrical and repetitive or rhythmic movement is relaxing and calming. Think of laying in a hammock or a rocking chair, while faster spinning movement like a roller coaster wakes us up. Did you know that typically we are more capable of learning when our bodies are moving? Movement increases our attention, and there are so many studies that show we think better standing than sitting. A good chunk of our brain turns off just by sitting. Any type of movement will stimulate the vestibular receptors, but spinning, swinging, and hanging upside down provide the most intense and longest lasting input. A word of caution about the vestibular system and vestibular activities before we go on. As I was saying, vestibular stimulation can have a significant impact on your nervous system. Vestibular activities must be supervised carefully to watch for signs of overload. Negative responses can include excessive yawning, hiccuping or sighing, irregular breathing, color change, sweating, increased anxiety, pupil dilation, changes in sleep and weight patterns, significant changes in overall arousal, for example, falling asleep or giddiness. If you see any of these signs, stop immediately. It is very important to remember that vestibular input can often be alerting and disorienting. Adding to the element of turning the head upside down can lead to the extreme disorientation of the nervous system for youth, and this type of input can contribute greatly to sensory overload. We are learning more about how much of this input is good and where to find the benefits of it. Some research is showing that 10 to 23 spins is a good amount. Less is not enough, but more can be too much, and it is very difficult to gauge. So if you're experimenting with these intense forms of vestibular input and activities, it is best to do so in coordination with an occupational therapist and always go slow and observe. Looking at how do we respond to vestibular input. So youth on that oversensitive side of the continuum who might respond in fear and anger may not like movement activities. They may appear sluggish, avoid different movements, and may avoid changes in head position. For example, ride on toys or being upside down. Some strategies for these individuals who are oversensitive and have that tiny cup that overflows would be to gradually introduce movement activities. Start with the proprioceptive exercises first, as they are more regulating for our bodies, and to provide choices to ensure the activity is teen-driven and predictable. And when looking at how vestibular input impacts a teen who is undersensitive to movement and gravity, they may be the ones that are seeking out more movement than others and under-responsive to certain movements. They might crave intense movement, they might be moving constantly, they may love being upside down, and they might be crawling, climbing all over the place. Some strategies or activities to build into their day to meet their needs could include jumping or bouncing, like doing jumping jacks or bouncing on a large ball, swinging, spinning, rocking, climbing at the park, using riding toys, walking, running or sports, hanging upside down, monkey bars or yoga, doing downward dog, bear crawls, doing different animal walks during transitions from one activity to another, giving them body breaks to move and stretch, and using what we call active seating, which is often done best with a coordination and direction from an occupational therapist. And those might be things like a move and sit cushion, which is an inflatable cushion that goes under their seat to give them some wiggle, or a tool called a hockey stool, all of which you can ask your OT more about. Proprioception is another very important sense that can also have a very powerful effect on our bodies. We receive proprioceptive input in the receptors that are in our muscles and joints. The proprioception system tells us where our body parts are positioned, their position in relation to each other, people, and objects, and how much strength and force to use. Proprioception equals heavy work. For example, how hard you need to press your crayon or pencil on the paper, how hard you need to hold that pencil, how far to throw a ball, or picking up a heavy versus light object. It also plays a huge role in developing a body scheme or map that we memorize and use to develop motor planning abilities. Dysfunction in this sense has a very significant impact on calmness, focus, and coordination. So how does proprioception impact us, our behavior, and our arousal? It can alert us or calm us depending on the situation. This is the only sense where it's a bit more confusing, and working with an OT can be extra helpful. It tends to be regulating in general. It may increase those feel-good chemicals like serotonin in the body, which creates a calming effect, and it's rarely, if ever, overloading for the body. My favorite expression is when in doubt, use deep pressure. It is good for seekers and sensitive youth, movers and crashers, good for teens who are active and on the go, good for teens who are uncoordinated and clumsy, good for teens who have difficulty planning movements, good for teens who have difficulty paying attention, and good for teens who have difficulty calming their bodies. Again, like it says at the bottom, when in doubt, do heavy work. And a bit more in detail, deep pressure is calming. When you're aware of your body, you feel more secure and that nervous system is happy. For example, imagine yourself sitting here trying to concentrate on this discussion, and you find yourself getting sleepy. You might instinctively stand up and stretch to help wake yourself up. Try and stand up now and see how you feel. The stretch you provided to your muscles helps to increase your arousal and allows you to better concentrate on the task at hand. This is proprioceptive and vestibular systems working together. Other examples of proprioception activities that we may all use to help self-regulate are chewing gum, tapping our feet, or fidgeting with a pen in your hand. Teens who are under-responsive to this type of input may require more movement and more touch to stay alert and organized compared to their peers. Teens may be so motivated to move that it's hard to maintain attention for any length of time. This desire to move can compromise their ability to attend and learn new skills. On this slide, let's discuss a few proprioceptive activities and whole body activities that can be provided throughout the day and or built into the day as needed to give those teens what they need. Stacking or moving books or grocery items, pushing a grocery cart, pulling a wagon or tug of war, helping clean, raking, brooming, mopping, scrubbing. You can also try playing in the sand, shoveling and building, jumping activities, push-ups on a wall or chair push-ups, bear crawling and crab walking, catching and throwing a large ball, kicking a ball, stretches, deep pressure like a big hug, weighted items which should often be used with supervision and direction from an OT, and compression items again to be used with supervision or direction from an OT. Some deep pressure or weighted items include things called cozy clothes, weighted vests, compression vests, weighted lap pads, weighted blankets, adding weight to a backpack, a body sack, an inflatable pea pod, a beanbag chair, or a large therapy ball. These are often best introduced or consulted with an OT. Some proprioceptive activities that are great for the hands include Play-Doh, clay, silly putty activities, a stress ball, a squishy ball for the hands, pushing your hands or pulling the fingers, or pulling apart resistive toys like Lego, squigs, or snap beads. At the top you can see a squishy ball, and on the bottom you can see what are called squigs. They're little suction pieces of different shapes that can either stick together and stick to flat surfaces like glass, windows, baking trays, or shiny tables, and they are really great for some heavy work. Some proprioceptive activities for the mouth include blowing bubbles in a cup through a straw, playing with bubbles, sucking through a straw. You could also try a curly straw to increase that input, chewing crunchy or chewy foods, deep breathing, chewlery, or chewable toys, always used with supervision, and musical instruments that involve blowing, like a harmonica or recorder. Now we've come to the eighth and final sense, interoception. This is the awareness and perception of sensory information from our internal organs to our brains, like hunger, thirst, bladder fullness, or heart rate. It's kind of the newest of the senses to join the scene, and there's very limited research to date, but new information keeps emerging all the time. We don't know a ton about it yet, so strategies are limited, but it's always good to consider how these internal states are influencing our behavior and arousal. So right now, sit back and close your eyes. What do you feel inside your body? Is your heart beating fast or slow? Are you breathing deeply or shallowly? Do you have to go to the bathroom? Are your muscles tense or loose? How does your stomach feel? Most of us are able to feel all these sensations with the help of this little known but very important eighth sensory system. When the interoceptive system is properly working, the sensations alert us that our internal balance is off and motivates us to take action to do something that will restore the balance and help us feel more comfortable. For example, if we feel thirsty, we get a drink. If we feel full, we stop eating. If we feel cold, we put on a sweater. If we need to urinate, we go to the bathroom. If we feel anxious, we seek comfort. If we feel frustrated, we seek help. Interoception underlies our urge for action. If we feel that our internal balance is off, we are motivated to act to seek immediate relief from the discomfort caused by the imbalance. Often teens with sensory processing difficulty have significantly lower awareness of their interoceptive signals. For example, not feeling hungry or difficulty with toileting due to poor awareness of a full bladder. Less often, teens may have heightened interoception and may be overly sensitive to internal body functions, making it hard to move on and focus if they're only somewhat hungry or somewhat constipated. Now that we've covered all the senses, let's bring it all together. We can all have sensory processing difficulties sometimes. You might find that if you're tired, sick, or stressed, that your ability to tolerate other senses and sensations is really decreased. However, most of us have learned to seek and avoid sensations to help maintain and organize ourselves, to help ourselves feel just right. A lot of teens with sensory processing difficulties do not yet have the tools for self-organization. So what do? You need to be a sensory detective. When are they most calm? When are they most engaged? When are they most active? Let's review a few scenarios to flex those sensory detective muscles and see if you could think of some strategies. Scenario 1. Your teen is busy and on the go this morning. They are crashing and jumping on the furniture. How do we get them to sit down for breakfast? Take a minute to pause this and brainstorm a couple strategies and ideas before listening to mine. So you might need a visual support like a sand timer, and then you could let them know that they have 5 minutes for jumping because they clearly need to move their body. It's good sometimes to provide the input in a structured way so they know what to expect and when they might get what they need again. You might follow this up with some squeezes, a massage, a hot dog game where you roll them in a blanket, or roll a therapy ball over their body, or maybe let them have something weighted on their lap at the table while they eat. Scenario 2. Your teen is getting dressed and you notice that they avert when you touch them lightly. You've also noticed that they get upset when they get their hands dirty outside or during meal times. Take a minute to think of some strategies or ideas. Did you think about the expression, when in doubt, use deep pressure? Maybe you could also set up a mirror in front of them when they dress so that when you help assist, your touch is not a surprise. You can prepare body parts with deep pressure that are sensitive and make sure that you tell them what you're doing as you're about to do it. For example, you could say, I am going to squeeze your hand now, or I am putting on your shoes. Scenario 3. You notice that your teen covers their ears and becomes upset when they hear unexpected noises. For example, a fire siren, and when appliances at home are used, like a blender or a vacuum. Take a minute to brainstorm some strategies and ideas. First, you can let them try some noise-canceling headphones. This strategy works well for those who are especially sensitive to sound. Just knowing that they have a strategy can be calming enough for them to not actually need that strategy, so they don't feel stuck or that they don't have a plan. You might try some deep pressure before they know they need to hear something that's stressful, and make sure you give them a warning. I'm going to use the blender now, or I'm going to do some vacuuming. Again, playing into that predictability for them. Another good strategy for those who don't like the public toilets that sometimes flush unpredictably is to bring Post-it notes in your bag with you so that you can place them over the sensor and keep it from surprise flushing. Some of those scenarios might have sounded like your teen, and some of them might not. You might need more support from an occupational therapist. An OT can help determine the intensity, frequency, duration, and order of activities that they might need. They might help you to develop a sensory diet or help you consider how sensory input would be beneficial in the flow of your teen's day. They might do a sensory processing assessment and tailor strategies specifically to your teen, and they may recommend specific sensory equipment that may work for some and not for others, or that may result in more risk, like a weighted item or compression garment. Sensory systems are very unique. There is no one size fits all, and strategies need to be tailored to your teen. Sometimes this may take a bit of trial and error, but it's all great information that tells us more about your teen's unique system, whether a strategy happens to work or not. If you need some more support and you need to find an occupational therapist, you can contact intake at extension 1214 at KidsAbility to determine your eligibility for OT support. If your teen has autism spectrum disorder, you can access private OT services using your childhood budget funding. Private occupational therapy options are available in the community, and you can visit www.coto.org, which is the College of Occupational Therapists of Ontario, to find a private OT in your community. At KidsAbility, we offer a variety of valuable resources to support teens and their families. One of our programs is our Sensory Teen Group and Sensory Parent Education Group, both of which are run by our skilled occupational therapists. These groups are designed to help both teens and their parents better understand sensory needs and how to navigate them in everyday life. Whether you're looking for strategies to support your teen or seeking tools to better understand sensory processing, these groups provide a supportive and informative environment. To join, simply scan the QR code on the screen to register and get started.